Hello and welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. Today I'm talking to Dr. Ken Rowe, a doctor who spent decades seeing what happens when men push themselves too far and now helps men step back into the second half of their life with more strength and purpose. So very welcome to you, Ken.
Very nice to be here, Philip. Thank you.
So you've spent 35 years in emergency medicine treating men, often at some of the worst times of their lives. What patterns have you seen? What patterns did you start to see in midlife men specifically?
Well, Philip, after 35 years, I got to say I didn't start seeing the patterns immediately. It took a while. I think that's kind of the theme of what we're all here for and what we're talking about is that as you get up in years, you develop wisdom and experience and the ability to reflect. And it's that ability that allows you to become a better person and to serve more purpose in this world. So to kind of get back to the story, ER, worst days, in London, of course, it's A&E. The worst day of your life, massive stroke, massive heart attack. And for several years, it was just that, let's treat this stroke, let's treat this heart attack, let's get on this, let's get this person well as best as we can. And, but maybe over the past 10 years, after I had my own personal health transformation, I started seeing my patients differently. I didn't start seeing people as diagnoses and something to do immediately. I started seeing them as human beings. And, I always had the question in the back of my mind, what got them here? Where did they start? Because this stroke, this heart attack didn't just come about this day. There's been some building up to it. Is there anything in this person's life? And of course, it's just more being humane and more compassionate and adding that layer to it. And, it reminds me of a professor I had in medical school. He said, Ken, medicine is always going to be more art than science. And at the time, of course, it was heavily science. We're studying biochemistry, physiology, diagnosis, disease, differential diagnoses, everything that had to do with the science of medicine. But the art of medicine, that is the interpersonal, the compassion, the understanding where a person's coming from, and understanding how he feels, and whatever his diagnosis is going to impact not just him, but his whole family and his whole community. That became, towards the middle of my career, something that I started to cultivate. And, it finally came to a kind of a breaking point, epiphany, if you will, when I had my own, Dr. Heal Thyself, when I had my own health issues and my own health journey. So, something like that has really made me, at this stage of my life and career, allowed me to really reflect back and really, I think, impact the men that I'm helping now through my practice and through my thought leadership in my articles.
Let me ask you, when these men came in and presented with, I guess life-threatening conditions, were many of them, and I don't know how much chance you talked about, looking at them as humans as opposed to a patient, but were many of them surprised that they got there? Did this kind of creep up on them, or do you think? I guess, are men sleepwalking into this, or do they kind of know, but are just can't shift out of a rut and make any changes?
I think it's the latter by far. I don't want to put percentages on it, but it would be the very rare man that didn't know that this was coming on some level, subconsciously or consciously. And even more of a tragedy is that I don't think there was anybody who had inside their family circle, their partners, their children. I mean, the whole tribe saw it coming and didn't really know how to take the steps to evoke a change. Because most of the men that I'll see, very successful on the outside. They're providing, they're taking care of their families, they're making income, they're saving for their retirement. I guess they're in the rat race, if you really want to put it that way. But they're they've become comfortable in that lane, and they really don't want to get out of that lane. And there's a whole aspects and buckets to life that you really have to maintain and make sure that everything's filled. We're talking about relationships and spiritual and being able to reflect back and being a whole person, kindness. But once you get into that success lane, accumulation, storing for the future, retirement, that mindset, and that also it reinforces the mindset that you're a man, that you can handle things, that you're the go-to person when other people have problems. You're not supposed to have problems. You're supposed to be the problem solver. So you get that mindset that gives you an identity. And from that identity, that really starts shaping your decision making and your moods and pretty much everything you stand to be very completely. You think it's very insidious, but it's very complete. You can name it. It's like you're the big brother, or you're the hardworking dad, or you're the provider for uh, your family, your children. You're the stalwart of your community. You're the captain of your ship for other people. But when do you actually take the time? When do you actually look into your own inventory and say, well, I need to be filled up in this area, or I'm kind of maybe deficient in this other area. It's very tough to do that.
And I guess, as men, especially older men, we're kind of conditioned, right, from childhood to not really pay that much attention to ourselves. And as you said, be the strong, don't complain. You got to be other people relying on you. But I guess that's part of the problem, right? We're just conditioned, and you go through your life thinking, well, I haven't got time. I'm not going to. It's indulgence. Why would I even look at my inwards of myself?
Well, that's absolutely true, Philip. I mean, we're conditioned to be men. That kind of defines us. And then also, there's in medicine, at least in the United States, and I think it's the same way all around the world. We take care of our kids, we take care of our geriatric older patients, either by direct insurance or just bias. I mean, there's a functional bias that goes on in our scientific, supposedly way of thinking, but it's also clouded by our judgment, and a lot of that judgment is unconscious and subconscious. That is, when you're a child, you need to be taken care of. You're going to be, obviously given resources. You're still a kid. You don't know, you haven't matured yet. When you're an older, maybe 65 or so older, then we need to take care of you because you're not working anymore. You're retired. There are certain medical conditions that obviously get worse with age. So we're going to take care of you. But who's going to take care of the people who are the caretakers? That is middle-aged men and middle-aged women, but we're focusing on middle-aged men. So there's pressure on all sorts of different levels. It's cultural pressure, it's identity pressure, it's even economic pressure, because the penalty that you pay for missing work or not working hard enough to get your pension or long enough, or the healthcare system is geared, and it's not geared for health, and it's not geared for middle age thriving. It's geared for sickness. So the sickness is going to manifest when you're older, typically, percentage wise, of course. And of course, when you're younger, it's taking care of the youth, so they can get their education. So the provider, and in America, well, everywhere, I call it the triple provider effect. It's kind of like a sandwich, and you're in the middle. So you're taking care of kids, younger people. You're also taking care of older, maybe your parents. You're taking care of your partner. But who's taking care of you? I mean, that's not even a one-way street. That's like the Arc de Triomphe with different spokes going out, and nothing's coming in. So, and that's a real problem, because with that becomes the internalization that, hey, you're supposed to handle this. And, men don't typically get together and say, well, let's have some constructive criticism here as a group, as our peer group. You're going to go off and play golf, and it's going to be just a fun game of playing golf. And then one person's going to score better than the other, but that's not going to be any big deal. But in life, what if we had men that got together and really gave each other some good feedback, critic, some good constructive criticism. And the men were vulnerable and talked about, hey, I'm really having problems with this issue, or I'm really suffering in this lane. So I really need some help. I mean, I'm doing well in these other avenues, but I'm not doing so well in this one. So that's kind of what we need to reach out for. Men need to be more holistic. We need to take our ego out of the equation. And, I love the concept philosophically of ontological humility. That is, we need to know that our story and our lives and our life experience is just a very small part of the rest of the world. And that gives us really good perspective. And it also takes us out of our own head to where, that's where I'm the only one with this problem. No one else is going to have this problem. I should get this figured out. I should be able to handle this. I should be able to carry on. What's wrong with me since I'm not able to do this? And why am I feeling this? When the reality is every dadgum person in this world, every man is feeling the same things. We're just not sharing it, and we're not speaking about it in an open manner to where it could be productive and we could actually heal each other.
That's right, isn't it? Unfortunately, none of us are as special as we think we are, because actually we have a lot in common, and you're not alone in how you feel. So, speak to other people. Other people will be able to relate to what you're talking about. Let's talk a little bit about physical symptoms first, especially through your direct experience in kind of ER wards. We get to, our 40s, let's say, and all that, perhaps your body's not as forgiving. And I guess, you've got some debt building up. And then it kind of starts, turning, and there's no particular age for any particular person, but, things creep in, right? So things like diabetes or high blood pressure or, fatty liver, all these conditions, which are all then triggering something a lot more serious, down the line. Do you think men are, do you think we're just not aware that as we age, we really need to change those habits, and that it is going to come up and, bite us on the backside before too long? I mean, I guess the people that you were meeting and treating, could you, and going back to this idea of patterns, could you see that there was a trend in the way that, men in midlife were living their lives?
So, Philip, that is an excellent point. And one thing that I want to point out too, that I'm trying to kind of change the nomenclature is, we talk about the midlife crisis, right? And we think about that, or we picture that as more of a cliche. Your friend, somebody that not you, all of a sudden went through a midlife crisis. So he divorced his wife, he got a sports car, he started dating younger women, this sort of stuff. So that's going to define, Uncle so-and-so had a midlife crisis. My messaging is that we all are going through a midlife crisis. Men are in our society. A crisis is defined by consequences. And it's just like what you talked about. We start having metabolic dysfunction that leads to increased blood pressure, diabetes. What is essentially, and I think this is going to hit with your audience, because this is something that I really bring to the table as an ER doctor. So in the ER, our motivation, our whole the way we're geared is to save people's lives. And when people are in life-threatening situations, you can name it. It's MI or heart attack, stroke, major trauma. What's happening is that the only reason that we live on this world is because of oxygen. So we're talking about disrupting oxygen supply either heart attack, stroke to a certain part of the body. Uh, in trauma, oxygen is not being delivered because you're hemorrhaging. So oxygen is not getting to the tissues where they need to go. In essence, what's happening when we turn 40, and I'll give you an interesting tidbit. In medical school, and I was in medical school in the 80s. I'm 62 right now, just to age myself, so I can uh, kind of connect with the audience. We were taught that at the age of 30, that nothing is growing, that you are slowly in senescence and you're slowly deteriorating. So by the age of 30, you're officially at your peak and you're going downhill, mentally, physically. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. So this is my mindset when I got out of medical school and I got to the age of 30. I remember it well. I celebrated it quite nicely. And it was, well, this is it. It's all going downhill from here. And what we've learned over the years is that certainly that nothing could be further from the truth. Certainly in neuroscience with neuroplasticity, you can teach an old dog new tricks. And not only that, the old dog is getting smarter as he's getting smarter. He's getting more wisdom. He's getting crystallized intelligence. That's why older people are better at trivia and they're better at crossword puzzles and they're better at pattern recognition. And I saw this in my own career as I was getting progressing through my own career in my 40s, in my 50s. I really felt like I was getting more competent. I was getting better. I was able to read signs better. I was able to read people better. Without, I was able to understand nonverbal communication better. Um, Not that I was understanding my wife better, because that kind of went the other way, and she was the one that corrected me. So obviously, lots of room to grow. But the bottom line is, you're not stagnant. You're not declining backwards at the age of 30, 40, 50, 60, even 70 in a lot of arenas in your life. Now, aging is inevitable, you know, but decline is optional. Decline is something you can fight. Decline is something that you can just say, all right, I'm not going to accept that. That really ties into identity. And a lot of what happens at the age of 40 at the physiological level is that because you're not pushing yourself a little bit, challenging your body a little bit, challenging your mind just a little bit each day to try to offset the natural decline of aging, then you're going to be on that slope or decline of aging. So little by little, you are not doing as much as you normally do. You're not walking as much as you normally want to. You don't feel like you have the power to lift that object like you used to. You don't feel like you want to go up those stairs. You don't feel like you want to go up that ladder because things are hurting. You're getting a little short of breath. And so essentially what you're doing is that ceiling that you had for vigorous living when you were 20 and 30, not only does the ceiling get lower, but the floor gets lower too, incrementally. And that's the expectation, and you know how the old adage is very, very well known in psychology that, you tend to be influenced by your own peer group, the closest 5 people around you. So not that I'm saying, hey, you got to boot out Bob because he's the weak link in my 5 buddies, but you just have to be aware of it. If you guys are all doing certain um, things in your life that aren't really increasing the amount of, let's just say, increasing the amount of blood flow where you need it, that is doing the exercise, sleeping, nutrition, all the things that people already know about, then you're jumping on that decline instead of fighting it. So you're just accepting aging, and you're just saying that this age I'm going to be this, and I can't expect to feel like I did 20 years ago. That is completely untrue. With all the science and uh, all the options that we have right now, That we cliche it, 60's the new 40. But if it really is true if you're able to understand that when you're 40 and 50. You can certainly understand it at 60 and make a big change. It's a little bit harder. So it's a lot it makes it a lot easier if you look at your physiology as a compounding interest bank account. If you started it when you were younger, you had compound interest, it really compounded and you could see the fruits of your labor. Um, But if you just don't put anything in that account, if you didn't make any deposits, well, then don't expect to have any capital and don't expect to be able to make any withdrawals when you need it because essentially you're not going to have any capacity. You're not going to have anything in the bank account. And so to make that analogy with your body, then you're going to end up having a bad outcome, heart attack or stroke.
What about warning signs? People listening to this, what are kind of warning signs, physically and probably mentally, that you're not just getting older, something needs to change?
I think sleep disruption is kind of a subtle sign. Like you're waking up frequently in the night and not just to go to the bathroom. We're not talking about a prostate where you're just waking up. Your sleep is fractured. So, I mean, remember when you were a teenager, you could just sleep whenever you wanted to. You could take naps. You could sleep in. You had sleep that you could take care of it on the weekend and just be gold. Be ready to rock and roll. That changes. That does change because what it is, it's not just sleep. It's sleep is the body's chance to not only repair itself but to grow. Your muscles are growing when you sleep. Your brain is reorganizing when you sleep. So not getting enough sleep and getting fractured sleep, that's kind of an early sign, and that kind of goes along with brain fog and fatigue. I mean, these are just small signs. You shouldn't really have a big crash in the afternoon. Everyone just kind of accepts that and says, "All right, well, I'm getting tired. It's about time to go home, and I'm really feeling it." Um, that's really not normal, and we've normalized that because we just kind of talk amongst ourselves. Well, time for some more coffee. I mean, that was a big lunch, so that's why you're feeling like this. And another thing amongst men, Philip, is erectile dysfunction. You know, I kind of chuckled because the urologist will say, yo, did you know the statistics? 50% of men over the age of 50 have uh, erectile dysfunction. And so my answer to that is, kind of like the old adage, is 50% have it and the other 50% are lying. Because it's like after the age of 50, I mean, I'm sorry, none of us are like we are when we're 18. And if you are, you're lying. Not that you want to be at that level, but you certainly don't want to be in a situation where you're dysfunctional. And talk about, being quiet about it or not being silent about it, not knowing that there are, of course, options, but also thinking of it as a early warning sign related to blood flow. I mean, that's a very personal, beautiful example that every man can relate to. So, and another thing that's very subtle is eyesight. One thing everybody just accepts, oh, my eyes are just terrible. It gets worse when you're looking at screens, but that can be a big problem because when we're looking at screens, um, we are our brain is allocating resources and blood flow to that visual sight. And so if you're not changing your vision, if you're not out in nature, if you're not looking at the sky, all of a sudden you're losing that ability to do that because your body is adjusting to all of your input. And that's kind of the interesting thing from a scientific physiological point of view. Your body is very smart. Your brain is very smart. It's like the master resource allocator for the whole body. So if you are sitting down at your desk for hours on a day, your brain's going to say, well, we don't really need to get blood flow over to that muscle that he's not using. And so when you try to even get back to use that muscle, not only is the muscle smaller, but the signaling, the blood flow and the nervous signaling is a lot slower as well. So then that leads to just a decrease in function. And it will lead to an increase in injury too if you decided to get back on that football field and play a little game over the weekend. And so that's why we are us weekend warriors. A lot of them end up in the ER with these ankle, Achilles, shoulder, elbow, neck pains and injuries. Sorry if that sounds familiar, but that's a pattern.
So people listening to this, including myself, thinking, oh no, well, what am I going to do? Can I, is it too late? What can I do? I don't want to decline. I don't have to decline, but my bank, whatever I've been putting in has not been enough. What can I do instead of sat here listening, panicking now that it's all too late?
Well, I'll tell you, this is counterintuitive, but I think it's kind of a refreshing point of view. One thing that doesn't work is motivation. Absolutely doesn't work, because motivation is a subjective opinion, essentially. It might be even more of a feeling or an emotion. It's not a real thing. It's just how you assess yourself at the time. And once again, it's something that's in, not out. What you really need to do is, first of all, kind of give yourself a lot of compassion. I'm in this situation. Don't beat yourself up. There's no shame here. This has been going on for so many years, and obviously it's here because we had COVID, we have Netflix, we have everything that can be delivered. We've got technology at our fingertips. So why do we need to get outside and hunt or gather like we're wired to do? I mean, we've progressed as a society, so we don't need to do that. But your body doesn't know that. So really the most important thing is to get curious and scientific. I always tell my patients that measurement is much better than motivation, because once you measure where you are with a good scale, with your blood pressure, and certainly here's where I would really have you want to find a proactive physician or provider that can help you with this, because there are a lot of biomarkers, a lot of tests that you don't typically get every year, and tests that you should follow up maybe every couple of months to really understand where you are. So we're talking about definitely testosterone and its derivatives and how it affects the body. But we're also talking about other markers that really understand where you are with heart attack risk, stroke risk, and your metabolism. So really start with measuring and also getting information, becoming knowledgeable.
So you should ask your doctor. You could ask your doctor for these tests. I guess you might have to pay for them, right? You certainly would in the UK. You wouldn't just get those tests. Your GP wouldn't do that for you.
Most of the times you would. And I know that one of the things that we discussed is, as a physician, what do you ask your physician? Because most of the times when you go to your doctor, there's not a lot of two-way communication. You're going to come in with your symptoms. You're going to come in with your weight, your blood pressure, your vital signs. We're going to talk about, hey, Philip, how are you? How have you been in a year? I'm carrying on fine. I don't really have, anything that is unusual. I got some aches and pains, and okay, well, all your labs look okay. We have you on a few medications, and I think we should keep you on these medications, and I'll see you next year. So in essence, you're getting a transactional relationship, and nothing's really getting done other than you're just staying the course, right? I would really recommend that people start asking their doctors open-ended questions. My favorite one would be, hey, Dr. Brown, or Dr. Rowe, if you're coming to me. How do you honestly see me in 5 years? So we're real good. It's very helpful for us to play future selves with ourselves. So then we can kind of just look back and say, all right, here's what I want to be in 5 years. Here's what I need to do to reverse engineer to get it to today so I can get from here to there in a reasonable fashion. In other words, I should have a plan. And I will venture to guess that most doctors have never been asked that question ever. And if they kind of stumble on it, you probably shouldn't be too surprised. But if your doctor says, you know something, I've never heard that, but let me think about that. Let me try to come up with a game plan to really make you very, really kicking some tail in the next 5 years, have you have a lot of vitality where you can be your best self. And I really think if you find the correct doctor, or certainly you can do some research on your own as well to kind of complement that, then you can really nail down what's really important for 5 years. And I don't want to discuss all the usual things. Everyone's going to say, well, you got to have an optimal weight. You got to put on muscle. You got to diet. You got to exercise. And I think the more that we generalize these things, the more it just tends to go into one ear and go out the other ear. People just go, oh God, I'm hearing the same old, just get me on the GLP-1 so I can lose weight and get me on some testosterone so I can carry on, so I can just be who I want to be. Isn't there a shot for that? So yeah, I think asking your doctor some open-ended questions like that would really change the relationship. And asking yourself those same questions would really be a benefit.
And so what you work with men come and see you who have all sorts of conditions, etc. How much is the mental, your mental state impacting your physical state?
Oh, it's huge. When we talk about, in my practice, I do a lot of identity engineering, because we kind of get to the root to who you really think you are, or what you represent, and what is your identity. And I think as men, you identify with your career. Maybe you identify as a family man as well. But the depth is pretty much stagnant at those levels. Who are you? Well, I'm a pharmacist. Who are you? I'm a physician. Who are you? I'm a teacher. And the conversation and the identity kind of stays there. But what I try to instill, because this is something that's been very well studied in psychology, the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset, right? By Carol Dweck, very, very famous. And so if we feel like we can't change, then that's going to be our mindset, our identity. We're going to be very resistant to change. If we feel like, no, this is who I am, and this is a fluid situation, and this is who I am at 50, but this doesn't mean that I'm going to be a certain way at the age of 60. In fact, I really feel like I'm going to be someone else on 60. I have a chance to be better. I have a chance to have a growth mindset. I'm the type of person that doesn't miss workouts. I'm the type of person that doesn't drink excessively. I'm the type of person that takes care of my health on a day-to-day basis, because I understand that what I do today will impact me in 5 years. The question is, will this be important 5 years from now? And the answer is absolutely yes. Whatever I'm doing today will be important 5 years from now. And that can be positive or negative. So if we're looking at it in that manner, then that's the identity that we want to try to cultivate. Whatever I do has an impact. People around me are impacted by me, my family, myself. It's not all just about me and me just doing whatever I want to do. And, it's it's the environment that we're in. I mean, we're in such a distraction epidemic that even when we try to plan and do something, we just reach for our phones and scroll for the next interesting thing. I mean, I'm a humongous sports fan. Um, do I really need to know the latest score in that game? 10 times over the game? You know, well, maybe if it's my favorite team, I'm actually watching the game. But, do I need to know the scores of all these other teams? Probably not. Do I need to get notified of the final score in the standings? Probably not. I mean, so, even when you think that you're relaxing, or then what you think you're having some downtime, or you're giving yourself some brain candy, that's actually working against you, because that's just another distraction um, from distracting you away from something that's going to be productive. And Philip, what we found in neuroscience, that there's a huge dopamine loop for procrastination. Avoiding something that you don't want to do because it's just an irritation. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to read that book. Um, I don't want to sit down and have that kind of toughish conversation with my kids or my spouse, because I'm just too tired. I don't want to do that. But it's funny, you're never too tired to scroll on your phone and take a look at whatever interests you. So, it's taking that time and understanding that there are times in the day where things can be more productive, and you can have an iterative activity, but you default choose to do something that's a little more, I guess, pleasurable, a little more mindless. So it's just taking those small moments and converting them into something that's productive. I think that's the key step to getting to where you need to go if you're just looking for a start.
And let me just loop back a second. So I just wanted to clarify this, and if you could just reiterate it. It's not motivation, right? It's not about motivation. So it's about just reiterate what it's about then. If it's not motivation,
you have to act your way into feeling. It's about actions. It's about taking small actions. Motivation and willpower, uh, very overrated. There's a book in the States. It was written by Spencer Johnson, called "Who Moved My Cheese," and it's a famous book. But for those of in the audience that really haven't read it, it's very simple. There's a group of three mice living underneath the streets. Their cheese gets moved. So there's one group of mice that they don't even think. They're just like, all right, where's the new cheese? Let's go find new cheese. And then the second group is lamenting, who took our cheese? I can't believe that someone took it. Can you believe that would happen? And then the third group said, oh, well, it's over. Someone took our cheese. We don't know what to do. I mean, what should we do? I mean, I don't know. Who should we find to help us? And so, of course, you can kind of categorize some of your thoughts, not your whole mindset, but maybe some parts of you that identify with all three of those sets of mice. And what the people who win the second half of lives, they're the doers. A lot of times thinking is a good thing, but most of the times you're just overthinking. We live in a world of micromanagement in our professional lives. Most of the times we're the ones being micromanaged. A lot of times, sometimes if we're the manager, we're micromanaging other people. That's how things kind of get measured, and that's how success gets defined, your key performance indicators. But, a lot of times you just have to act your way into feeling. You just have to go find that cheese without thinking. And that's kind of the main crux of it. Willpower, motivation, these are all intellectual things you can talk about. And the more you talk about it, the more you think about it instead of acting on it, then it's just, you're less apt to act, because you're just going to keep thinking about it, because it's more comfortable to think than act.
So I wanted to actually to ask you about this concept of winning the second half of life, and what that means beyond just health. And I think you just kind of went a long way to answering that, actually. But somebody listening to this today, feeling on empty, they're in their 40s, 50s, maybe, perhaps they've recognized some of the things that you've been saying, physiologically or mentally. And you've talked a bit about this already, but where do they start? Where do you start when you're feeling, at the bottom of a well, you can't find your way out, and, you realize that you don't have the body, the health, the mindset that you perhaps thought you might have when you're 50? What do you suggest they do? Just one thing, just to start them on a different path.
Well, I'll give you a couple of things because they're both related. I mean, first and foremost, give yourself, if you're listening, give yourself credit for listening. At least you're inputting and you're getting information and you're becoming curious. That's one crucial step. So the second step is to give yourself compassion, because if you go straight into the shame, then that's going to prevent you from taking action. It's the same thing we did with our cigarettes, and we had an anti-cancer campaign, and we showed black lungs, and what did that do? All that did was that caused smokers to feel more shame, so they smoke more. So it was just like completely counterintuitive to what we were trying to accomplish. So in this light, the more that you say, hey, something, this has happened, this is reality. Quite honestly, the odds were stacked against you for this to happen, because, over 80-90% of people in Western civilizations are metabolically unhealthy. So you're in the majority here. And that's completely explainable. And, but the fact that you're thinking about this already puts you in more of a 10%, 20% of people who want to do something about it. And of course, anything with behavioral change, it starts with a couple of things. It starts with the lens and the perspective. Where do I want to be in 1 year? Set the future self to 1 year, not 10 years, too far out, but something that's more tangible. Or even if you want to zoom that in even more, maybe 1 month, because that's when that's the secret sauce. That's when you really start having behavioral change, when you start thinking in those kind of time increments. Because every day is different. You wake up and you have a choice to direct that day. Completely up to you. You might have to go to work. You might have to do several different things, but your attitude, your energy level, your outlook, and your actions can completely change that day. You have the power of now and the present. So start with 1 push-up. Start with 5 jumping jacks. Start with 1 squat. Start with getting sunlight within 30 minutes of waking up. Start with just waking up at the same time. And it also is very helpful sometimes to just start with a food journal. That's what I start my patients on. Because it's a funny thing. When you start noticing things, when you start journaling, when you start categorizing, when you start taking inventory, things are going to change. There's a Hawthorne effect, right? In psychology, where people who know that they're going to be watched and measured, they start changing I guess it's like knowing that you have a CCTV right on you while you're walking the street. You're going to behave yourself because you know that you're being monitored. So start monitoring yourself. Start taking inventory on yourself, because you're worth it. Your health is worth it. And it just these days, it's so easy just to be a giver and to provide and to accumulate and to be successful. But really start defining what success is. And when I'm talking about winning the second half, we're talking about changing our definitions of what success is. Success is feeling energetic. Success is having a sharp mind. Success is having a body that can do things that you didn't expect it could do. When you went on vacation and you couldn't take that hike, maybe the next time you go on vacation next year, you're going to take that hike and then some, and you're going to feel better. It's just a positive upward spiral. When you start really realizing, well, I'm going to start applying what I'm successful in, business, learning, teaching, accumulating money, and I'm going to start applying this to things that are important in my health. And then you can start seeing the compounded effects. It's truly amazing. It's just a shift of intentionality and a shift in attention and just small habits every single day. But consistency is the key. I will say it's not willpower, it's not motivation, but it is consistency. And that's just showing up every day and doing something every day. As small as it might be, you know, that compounded interest accumulates over time like you wouldn't believe, and accumulates pretty quickly too.
Well, that's good news. That's good news for there's everyone could be successful at this. If people want to find out more about you or your work, perhaps contact you, where do they look?
My website is my name, KennethRoweMD.com. And my book is on Amazon for ebook and paperback. My editor is actually from London, and that's called Prime: Winning the Second Half of Life. That actually is listed under my name, Ken Rowe, because informally I like to be called Ken. But so if you're doing a search on Amazon, that's Ken Rowe MD. If you're looking for me and my health tips and everything that I can offer you, that's KennethRoweMD.com.
Well, we'll put those links in the show notes. Just leaves me to say thank you so much, Ken. That's been fascinating for me and hopefully for everybody else listening.
You're very welcome, Philip. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and thank you for all the people that you help.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. If you want to find out more about Ken, visit his website, www.kennethrowemd.com. You can also find his book, Prime: How to Win the Second Half of Your Life, on Amazon. As ever, to help raise the profile of the podcast, it really helps if you can please review it and follow the show on your podcast platform. And please share it with your networks and people you think might benefit from listening. If you have a story to share, then do contact me through the website mid-lifemen.com.